Hi, everybody. Welcome to part one of our Excellence in Execution podcast, where I'm going to be delighted to be sharing some insights into the people and cultural side of digital change with John Harkin, CEO and founder of Alchemy Technology Services, along with the fantastic Mimi Munchetty, director, and Ed Charlton, director. So stay tuned as we learn some fantastic insights. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the first in our podcast series, Excellence in Execution, where we're going to be exploring the people and cultural side of preparing for digital transformation, which includes planning for large-scale change and also moving from legacy systems to a future focus. So I am delighted to be joined today by some fantastic people from Alchemy Technology Services. And I have founder and CEO, John Harkin. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
I have director, Ed Charlton. Welcome, Ed.
Welcome. Thank you.
And last but very much not least, I have director, Mimi Munchetty.
Thanks, Caroline.
Hello, Mimi. So we're going to have a lot to talk about today. There is a lot going on in the transformational world, and I'm delighted to have your expertise to be able to drill down into those topics. John, to set the scene, I'm going to come to you first. You are the CEO and the founder of Alchemy. For those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about what Alchemy is and what do you do?
Yes, well, the mission really was for me to return to my homeland and really help create some challenging but exciting careers in the insurance industry for technologists and business people. It was a personal mission, and these folks joined me on it, which was great to see. The niche we focused on was the insurance sector. Having been the CEO of an insurance software company before, I was really aware of the fact that scaling up for major implementations was a challenge. The software company can't possibly handle that themselves. So, to create something different as a system integrator, to take the lessons we've learned cumulatively as a group of people and put it into a new business that's purpose-built was a very exciting proposition. And 6 years ago, we set off on that journey.
Now, I'm sure those listening to your accent will be able to hear where your homeland is, but just for clarity.
Yeah. So the northwest in particular of Ireland, particularly around the city of Londonderry.
Yes.
And the surrounding areas. Belfast is a big tech hub now. So the rest of Northern Ireland is leveraging that and joining in. Enormously
vibrant. Is it really 6 years?
Yeah, 6 years. Yeah.
Goodness me. Now, joined by Ed, again, an amazing career in, well, actually not just technology, but also law. So you have got bringing the experience there too. Now, Ed, from your perspective, John's mentioned about transformation. He's mentioned bringing all of the skills that John's learned over the years. When you're looking at the challenges that insurance companies are facing, and we're talking about excellence in execution here, what's making them look at doing that now? What's brought that up the agenda to make it a priority?
Well, I would add to start this off that I worked with John at a very large company in the past, and he and I worked very closely together. And I think we saw a lot of problems in how large companies, especially software companies, were trying to implement their software and whether or not their staff was appropriately trained. So when I learned about John's vision and what he intended to do with what we call the Alchemy Academy to recruit people out of school and train them properly, it really drew me to Alchemy. And I think in response to your question with respect to what's going on in the industry, I think there's a lot of chaos with insurance carriers trying to implement software. Someone was saying earlier today that the key is execution. Mm-hmm. You mentioned excellence in execution earlier. And there are so many problems today in the software world in executing the implementation of software for insurance carriers.
We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? I won't spoil the slogan for the podcast series, but planning and execution very, very much came to the fore. John, you talked about returning to your spiritual home and with Ed and bringing together those people who share your values, but also share your experience in creating Alchemy. there are many solution integrators in the insurance sector, I guess. What do you think makes a solution integrator stand out? What's that special sauce that you need to bring?
Yeah, I would say the very strong people focus and investing significantly in the software partners' products so that the people that are implementing those products actually do it in a way that our partners designed it to be done, and to purpose build a business to do that. Ed mentioned our academy, to train technologists in insurance and certify them so that when they sit beside a claims adjuster, they understand what the claims adjuster is thinking and what they need, and that they're a proper collaborative partner that really can step inside the shoes of that person and also bring that person on the journey of these world-class products that their company is investing in. Because frankly, many of these people have learned the way it's done here.
Yeah.
And, that doesn't make them an expert in the future state. And so to be their Sherpa or guide on that journey and to build their confidence and also to be able to listen to what's specific about that company and gel the two together is, I think, what we've been training people to do.
The people side of change is very often overlooked, isn't it? Especially in technology. And I know we're going to come down and drill down into that.
Or it's a bolt-on, because people think we need some sort of people agenda. But that's not taken seriously either. It needs to be integrated part and parcel of how you're approaching the entire transformation.
And is that how you see it happening sometimes as a tick box exercise or a...
Far too often. And then when the program runs over budget, they cut that part of the program, they try and maintain the budget, and then the whole thing spirals into these runaway systems that we see many, many times.
I'm going to come to Mimi on that later, because I know that Mimi is very much, when that runaway train is going, it's her job to get it back on track. So hold that thought, Mimi. I just want to bring the listener, thanks for joining us. We're going to hear lots and lots of tips about migrations today. I just want to bring the listener into the sort of territory of where we are operating. So Alchemy is based in the UK, but you've got your offices in Derry. And I know that you have a number of UK, European clients, and I want to sort of get your view on this as well, Ed. John, what's the priority for the UK? And then Ed, I'm just going to ask you, are we looking at different priorities or similar behaviours as we look overseas?
I would look at it industry-wide. I'll let Ed talk about the Americas as he's an expert there, but generically, insurance companies are facing dramatic change from their customer demands right through to regulatory stuff, and frankly, just removing legacy systems that are too slow to change. And the interesting thing about Alchemy, you asked me why we set it up. The other thing we saw was a need in the insurance sector to bring in fresh blood and fresh talent. Because the legacy systems have also got aging workforces that understand them. And to be honest, today's talent don't really want to work in that technology. So it's not just about the legacy system being too slow. It's about actually it becoming a serious business risk to, look after that organization. So
I think I read a stat recently that there are 60 billion live COBOL lines of code still in existence. Many of them still in insurance, some might say, not us.
Grads at university haven't done COBOL.
I know. We're showing our age. We're showing our age here. Ed, listening to what John has just said there, you are very much involved in Alchemy in all of its locations. Are there any differences in terms of experience?
I think that in the Americas, the legacy problem is amplified. And when I say legacy, I think there's a couple of different issues there. One is moving from an older software to a newer software. And for that, you have both the technical issue, but you have the people issue that John mentioned. You have a whole slew of people who have been trained and have been working on a legacy system for years and years. So what does the company need to do to take care of that workforce? And then when I think about legacy, there's another aspect to it, and that is moving from on-premises utilization of the software to the cloud, which is a major, major issue. And many of the software manufacturers today don't want to sell you software on premises. They want you to move to the cloud version.
Mm-hmm. There's many people, I guess, even in Alchemy with your new joiners who do not know the experience of going into the machine room and having to put an extra layer on because it was so cold in the basement. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ed. And I'll come back to some of those questions around legacy as well. Maybe I'll ask later, will we ever remove ourselves from legacy? Who knows? Let's pin that one for a moment.
Well, the thing I think we'll bring up is if people don't or aren't trained properly in the software products, and people can't act as guides for the business, often we see these new products becoming today's legacy because they're changed so often to reflect the as-is and what companies do today, where people are just doing their best. They've got to sign off what they think is going to work in some of these old-fashioned approaches. And so we're creating new legacy, and we're not careful, making a massive investment and going so far away from the core product and out of the box that, frankly, it just doesn't cut the mustard.
What do you think is that obstacle with the training? What?
Well, I won't mention my old firm, but before I set up Alchemy, I recommended this approach. I was laughed out of the building because, training people for 6 months to a year, really teaching them what to do, put them through our academy, put them through our boot camp, getting them to work in an agile and really hit the ground adding value was just unacceptable. It was 6 weeks training to get them billable, the norm.
Billable being the key.
So I was seen as crazy, a year of course and whatever. But frankly, if you don't, the client's wondering why they're there. What are they paying for? And so they become nameless resources in some remote location where all our clients know our people on a personal basis, one-to-one, really have a relationship, and they're part of a combined team, which ends up being very successful.
And we say insurance is a people business, don't we? So presumably as part of these migrations that you say can sometimes be faceless. The important thing of having somebody there to guide you, obviously the fact that you once... Are you crazy? And now 6 years later with a successful, thriving SI, perhaps sees that through a different lens.
Yeah. I think companies get to trust you and they trust that you're focused on quality and investment. And as we'll probably talk about, the trend we're seeing from our clients is, can you do that for us too? We want our own capability. What's your secret sauce that brings these people to such a level of expertise so quickly? With all their energy and the enthusiasm, that can really add value. So, we're attracting clients because they want to build their own capability. They don't want that dependent relationship on some SI because they got to live with these systems. They got to own these systems. They got to take them forward and leverage the flexibility and the opportunity they just invested in.
Absolutely. I'm nodding along because I know some of your people extremely well through the design thinking innovation programs. They've come on through us and they've been absolutely standout working with the insurers. So they've got that secret sauce. They've got that people-centric approach. So I've seen that firsthand. Mimi. Hello. Hi. I've got loads of questions to ask you. Loads of questions. So, Mimi, you have got enormous experience on transformation, digital change, program management, project management, business analysis. Goodness me, I could write. You could write the book. That is for sure. I know that a lot of people will be tuning into this podcast for some tips because they're going through their own painful journey, or they might be about to go through their own painful journey. And some of them working on deeply embedded systems that they're hoping to change. What's their journey going to be like? Just paint that picture for me first off of the stages that they might go through.
Sure. So I think there's a few things to consider before we start talking about the different stages. Making sure that the right people, and there's a varied amount of people across a business that are involved, So it's not just an IT project, right? It's not just a business project. It's a project or a program of work that many have to be involved in, have to use, need to make sure that it's not done to them, that they have some say in the decision making in terms of what's coming. So I think that's the first thing. Lots of different stages. Need to think about your business case, obviously. What's the value that you're going to get? What does it mean to me as an individual? So if I'm a claims handler or an underwriter, how's it going to change my world? Yeah. There's a whole load of analysis and implementation that can happen. Sometimes there's a bit of run-in towards the fire because there might be a fire partway through. And I think you need to be open-minded about this, right? Because in our project teams, whether they are technology folk, whether they are business folk, there's two types of people. There are people that are going to run towards a crisis naturally, right? And there's no right or wrong way to be. There's going to be some people that will shrink away in fear. So we have to bring them hope as well, right? And we have to instill that. But I think making sure that everybody that this is being implemented for is involved in this, so that when a new system is implemented, it's not just sitting there brand new with no context and no background. I think that's really important to make sure that everybody's with you on the journey.
It sounds massively important. And as you were speaking, I've got about 9 questions that I'm going to follow up with. Let me just unpick some of those. So one thing that resonated with me was the what's in it for me. WIFM. There's a new acronym. There's a newish acronym. The WIFM. So as you say, when you might be implementing a new claim system or a new policy admin system, in some cases it's very easy to list off the requirements in terms of bringing bureau and non-bureau together, actually. But what does that actually mean to that underwriter, that adjuster? So you talked about that. You talked a little bit also about creating kind of an emotional safety.
Yes.
An emotional safety for them. And particularly, I think I really liked what you said. You said, we're not just doing it to them. Tell me a bit more about that.
We've got to do it. We've got to do this implementation, this project, this program of work, whatever we want to call it. We have to be in it as one team. It's got to be partnerial. It's got to be collaborative. And it's got to be done in a way, in an environment where everybody has a voice. And the reason I say that is because often you can have two parties working together, a client and a supplier, and the client isn't necessarily listened to. They're the ones that have to use it, right? So, a supplier or an SI can go in, work on an implementation, and then they go, right? But this insurer is left with the system that they have to live with and use day to day. So it's really important to make sure that you're tapping into change agents that can influence the direction of travel in terms of change, but also making sure that people are feeling safe with what's coming, that it's actually going to enable them to do their tasks, their jobs, their team's jobs, etc.
If I could chip in, one of our big partners was just talking about a client that Mimi's working on at the moment. And they said, but you achieve the secret ingredient with your customer, trust. And what we endeavor to do is get the business and IT to develop trust as well as with us as a supplier. And that's not easy to do. That requires a level of authenticity and a level of straightforwardness and transparency so that there's no surprises. And as Mimi said, sometimes there's going to be issues. Of course, there's going to be issues that may look like they're going to head for crisis. But typically what escalates those to crisis is lack of trust and people taking positions and preparing to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I love your phrase, they say, look, actually, if you take this agile approach, if you do develop trust, you can fail
fast, right?
Fail fast, because it's just a cycle. It's just a sprint. You're looking at whether you're getting it right. You're not disappearing off for a year to build something and come back and go, ta-da, and everyone go, what's that? So that level of trust and transparency where, failure is not a bad word. It means, okay, that's not the route. Let's do it this way. And people are much more clear, but it's so quick. It's not pushing timelines back or delaying anything. It's all part of this cyclical process. And people just fear diminishes.
And what is it they say? You only really fail if you don't learn anything from it. Don't do the same thing again, please.
Exactly.
Don't do the same thing. Open conversation. Then you're talking about trust. We're talking about excellence in execution, and we hear quite a lot of phrases, terminology that people say. You need to have trust. You need to have openness, authenticity. Give us some advice, because it can be a sticky situation, can't it? With as a client as a service provider trying to potentially influence or steer your client either away from a fire or towards success. Give me some tips if I was a newcomer. Give me the John 1, 2, 3.
I'll chip in my bit. When I did my stage of my career where I was the runaway systems rescue type person.
Did you have like a little star on your T-shirt?
It's more a cape, really. but fundamentally, when I took the cape off and got real, the fundamental piece was often it was never a technical issue. It was never the technology. Look, these package systems work, right? If you just took it and plugged it in and got on with it and adapted your business to fit with what are world-class systems, you could implement these things in 6 months. You could get going. Right? But we get all into these difficult, we bring drama, human beings bring this stuff. And I would say absolutely every runaway system I looked at went wrong in the first 6 months. And by the way, during that first 6 months, every indicator was green. Right. But that's when it was going wrong.
So where did it bubble? What caused it?
So it's a lack of trust and understanding and belief in the original timescales. And people squeezing the time scales and challenging each other, but not actually listening and not actually really challenging and understanding. And a lot of dogma around, IT people always build in an extra year and they always build in padding. Business people always do this. So people don't actually listen and they don't dig into the questions and they don't come up with that realistic proper phase that lays out a plan that people buy into. Maybe you're the one that says this all the time. If you don't have a team at the starting line that have a belief and trust and buy into the success likelihood, that's when they all go wrong. And yet they plow ahead with these green indicators. And then suddenly all the indicators go amber and then suddenly they don't go red. Or down the track.
Or worse still, they go green to red, right? Which we've seen as well. Yeah.
Tell me about that, Mimi. So we are schooled in program management, project delivery, etc. So, sometimes we see the basics not even being done these days. But we learnt these basics for a reason, right? Because they work. And we've got these battle scars that prove that they work. Tell us what's in your toolkit, Mimi. What helps these transformations work?
Yeah, I think leveraging what John said, there's the trust piece, but there's also transparency. And too many teams are not that transparent in terms of being worried or being fearful of raising risks, of raising issues. Risks and issues, they can be remedied. Yeah, there's always mitigation for them. If we know about them and they're laid out, then we can manage those risks and issues. And I think mismanagement of risks and issues, assumptions, dependencies with other work streams that aren't necessarily your team, I think pulling all of that together, being transparent, particularly when you've got program level meetings, work stream updates, being able to capture your RAG status accurately and not feel fearful, but feel that you can be open and transparent and honest, means that you can move forward should you have to mitigate a risk or mitigate.
Well, what's the big dependency here on leadership, right?
Yes.
Leadership can't jump on people when something goes amber or red. They've got to go, well done. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Now, what do we need to do, right? And so it is a style, and if you like, the culture of the project, right?
Yes.
You could use that word. You could say, what culture are we going to have in this project? Because, by the way, that's where you're going to end up at the end. So if you have a collaborative, open, transparent culture, at the end of the road, you're going to have a collaborative, open, transparent organization that takes things forward, right? If you have a directive, very pushy, that's where you're going to end up at the end, right? You're going to end up with an organization that you've transformed. And unfortunately, you've just changed the culture to a directive, top-down, command and control culture. And you're not going to live with that forever. You might be able to live with that for a project and feel, I can get a project done this way. But is that the way you're going to run a business? Because that's going to be very top-heavy and very stressful.
No, exactly. And listening to you and just listening to Mimi, a lot of organisations talk a good story. Talk about trust, talk about leadership, talk about their values. And also when you're selecting an SI, we're all going to pitch our best story, aren't we? We're all going to put our smartest outfit on. How do you actually encourage that open culture, a culture where people can bring risks to the surface? I'm going to come to you as well, Ed, and ask this question. How do you give bad news to a client that they don't want to hear? How does that work in your world?
So I think if we were to lean on the leadership piece that John mentioned, when risks, issues, or anything goes a bit bump, right, in the night in terms of a project, the sooner we know about it as a leadership team, as managers of this program of work, the sooner we can look at what a solution could look like. For us not to be prepared is when fires start, is when houses are on fire, crisis mode happens. Mm-hmm. So if we can get this stuff drawn out, written up, be clearly articulated, run through at steerco meetings so that it isn't just our problem, it is also the sponsor's problem. These are important things. I think the other thing, just going back to one point I made earlier, it's really important on transformation projects that technology teams and business teams are co-owners, because it's about that buy-in, it's about that influence, it's about that ownership and accountability. It can't just sit with a technology team.
And you're nodding along there, Ed.
Well, that's a very important point, and we haven't brought it up, but we're seeing in the market that many of the insurance carriers, the teams are split. IT is split from business. And we as the SI, we think it's one team, but behind the scenes, it's often two teams. So from the very start of the project, we have to make sure that the requirements of the carrier come from a collaborative team within the insurance carrier, business and IT.
Thanks for joining us for part one of our first in our podcast series. Please stay tuned for part two, where we'll be diving into more around the people side of transformational change.